All right. Good morning, everyone. How are y'all doing today? My name is Joanna Chen. I am a senior application security engineer with the enterprise security team at Salesforce. And today, I want to have a quick chat with you about securing connected apps in your org. Before we get started, forward-looking statement. I'm sure you have seen many of these. Don't make any purchasing decisions based on anything you see or hear in this talk. Pretty straightforward. If you are an admin and you're new to connected apps, this is the right place for you. This is going to be a crash course. We have a lot to cover in a very short time. But if you aren't able to absorb all of it, don't worry. This deck and this recording is going to be made available after Trailhead DX comes to a close. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to go over what is a connected app. We're going to walk through what it looks like to use one as an end user. We're going to bridge into, as an admin, why you should be monitoring connected apps use in your org. And finally, we're going to talk about how to know what's going on, the details of connected apps being used in your org, and what you can do about it. So connected apps, what are they? Hopefully, you're familiar with apps that run on the Salesforce platform. That's things in your org that are built with Apex, Visualforce, Lightning components. Now, connected apps are a similar concept, but they don't run directly on the platform. They are connected to the platform using Salesforce APIs. That's why we've named them connected apps. There's a lot to them, and it's a very powerful feature on Salesforce. But because this is a crash course, there's 3 takeaways that I want you to have. The first is that a connected app integrates an external application with Salesforce. The second is that when you set up an integration with Salesforce, there's a lot of things you have to manage around setting up the connection before you can start exchanging information over the APIs. Connected apps offers you that functionality to help that API integration get set up. And the third thing is, when you hear terms like SAML, OAuth, OpenID Connect, these are protocols that are used to help connected apps work. So you'll probably hear those terms a lot. When you hear them, have a light bulb go off in your head and think connected apps. These are protocols for connected apps. Now, you might actually be using connected apps without even knowing. So if you have the Salesforce mobile app on your phone, when you open up that app and you see data that's normally in your org, that's actually connected apps in the background. Likewise, if you've logged into your org and you've seen in the app launcher an external app and you jump straight into that external app without having to log in again, that's also connected apps. So again, connected apps is a huge feature. We're not going to dig into every last use case because that is a talk in itself. And like we said, we're keeping this to crash course level. And so let's walk through an example. So connected apps integrate external apps with Salesforce, and that's great in theory. But what does that look like in real life, right? So let's pretend that you and your organization are in IT. You're an IT person. You are responsible for managing the sales pipeline in your org. That's accounts, that's leads, opportunities. And say you've been tasked with making a large import of opportunities accounts into your org. This is a big job. You got to get it done fast. So you look online. You look online for some tools that might help you get the job done quickly and efficiently. And you come across something like dataloader.io. This is the #1 data loader for Salesforce. It does exactly what you need to do. Perfect. Maybe you saw this on the App Exchange. So that's the screen on the left. Maybe you found that app through that app maker's website. Either way, it doesn't matter. What's important to you is you want to get that hooked up to your org so you can get your job done. So you click Get It Now. And what's going to happen is you're going to be asked to log in with your Salesforce username and password. Once that happens, you'll be prompted for the level of access to your org that you want to grant to your app. So you can see here the laundry list of access items that this app needs to function. Some of the more popular ones we want to call out are access and manage your data. That's the second one. And towards the bottom, there's perform requests for your behalf at any time. And this is you as a user. You can see at the bottom, user1@jchen.dev. That's my dev org. That's a user allowing access to the org, to this app. So that's it. You hit allow, and you are redirected into Data Loader's web app. You know, you explore in there. You find the area where you can do your import of all your leads and your accounts and your opportunities. And that's great. As an IT person, your job is done. And that's awesome, right? But wait, so there's a little more to it, and this is what we want to call out here. When you were that IT end user, when you allowed this app access to your org so that you could import all this data, at the same time, you're also allowing this app to pull data from your org. Now, in some cases, this is what you want. Say this app was a stats aggregation app, and you want it to be pulling data from your org in a scheduled job so that you can create these reports every 12 hours. That's not the case here. So that's why we want to call this extra exposure out. Now, as an admin, so let's take off our end user hat. Let's put on our admin user hat. And think about what just happened. Right? You now have exposure of your org to an external app. And as an admin, this might be the time where you start to freak out. You think back on what happened. You know, like, does this app now have my IT person's Salesforce password? Can it just pull all the data from my org, like willy-nilly? You do whatever you want with it? And so the answers to those questions we're going to find by having a little bit of a deeper look about what was happening in the background through that approval process. So we saw this screen earlier, right? This laundry list of items that the app needs access to. Now, when you see this screen in Salesforce, what's happening in the background is an OAuth exchange. Now, OAuth is an open protocol that allows two apps to share data securely between each other without having to give up individual usernames and passwords. So the answer to that first question is no. This app does not have your Salesforce IT person's password. When you were asked to log into the app, you did that on Salesforce. You put your Salesforce credentials into the Salesforce app. Then there's a bit of a technical dance that happens so that Salesforce and the app can talk to each other about whether you are who you say you are, things like that. So the second question we were asking ourselves was, what can this app access? Like, does it have access to everything now? Because, holy crap. The answer to that question comes in two parts. So first is what you granted access to in terms of what the app needed. So that's what you see on the left here. These bullet points that you see here are predefined options. They're what we call OAuth scopes. And the developer chooses these from a list. They did not write an essay, a personalized essay about what they need. These are predefined options. And the second part to that is you are approving app access as a particular user. So I'm user one in this scenario. The power that the app has is limited by the power that the user has. So it's a combination of both. So even if I allowed all the access possible that the app could ever want, that access still operates in the context of the user. Now, if I was a low-powered user and I can't see all the data in the org, then neither can the app. And so ultimately, the intersection of the access granted to the app and the user permissions is how you understand what the ultimate access is to your org. So we have covered a lot. I promise you this was a crash course, and we are powering through this. We walked through things as an end user, and so I want to just do a quick recap as an admin why you want to care about connected apps in your org. So when we did the walkthrough, what we saw earlier is that an end user granted access to your org to a third-party application, right? And this meant that this app can access your data, it can perform actions on your user's behalf, and that's true regardless of the user, of if the user is there at their computer initiating these actions. all of this is happening without any administrative oversight, which is a pretty scary thought. End users opening up your org to external parties, not really understanding the consequences, not really letting you know or getting your permission as an admin. These are all reasons why you would want to take a deeper look into what's going on in your org. So now that we've covered what connected apps are, we've walked through an example, and now that we understand kind of the risks you face sometimes when you implement them in the org, let's talk about, as an admin, what your options are. So the first step is, are they being used in my org? How do I know? Who is using them? How are they using them? You want to take an inventory of what you got going on in your org, and from there, you can develop an action plan about what you want to do about them. Do you want to allow them access? Do you want to block them? There are a couple choices that we will walk through in just a second. Understanding how connected apps are used in your org is pretty straightforward. We've got a setup page here. You can see that under the Connected Apps node, there's a page called Connected Apps OAuth Usage. Now, this is going to show you all the active apps that are being used in your org by all your users. If an app is no longer active or you revoked access, it's not going to show on this list. But anything that's actively being used across your user base is going to show up here. So we walk through this data loader example. We've got a quick description of what that looks like. And if we look under user count, we can see that 2 users are using the app. If you click into that, you can get data on which users are using the app, when they first accessed it, when they last used it, how often they're using it. This is really a one-stop shop for an admin to understand what connected apps are being used, how popular are they, what's the frequency of their usage. All the information you need in one page, 2 pages technically. If you were not an admin and you were just a user, another way to see this information is on the user detail page. So if you're not an admin and you were just the user installing connected apps, you'll see all these same details on your user detail page. We can see here again, dataloader.io at the top. And you'll also see it come up in your login history as you authorize apps. Now that we understand what's going on in the org, let's talk about your options for what to do about it. Now, you pretty much have 3. They're listed here. You can install a connected app, and that allows you to lay your own security policies on how that app is being used in your org. You can block a connected app if you don't want it to be used at all. You can just cut off access. And finally, we've got a feature on the Salesforce platform called Connected App Whitelisting. That one's a bit more complicated, so we'll go over that in the final slide. Now, installing a connected app. When we talk about installing an app into your org, we are not talking about downloading some kind of software onto your org or your computer so that you can run like a local version of it. That is not how this works. How it does work is it makes that connected app available for your own policies to be enforced upon it. So you're making a local copy of that org's kind of metadata so that you can customize how it's being used, where it's being used from, how the sessions are managed. We'll go through that in detail. So profiles and perm sets and IP restrictions will help you control your user base and where they're coming from. We've got session management, 2-factor authentication options for customizing how the app connects to the org. Now, again, I want to emphasize, this is not you changing the source code of the app. This is how the app will operate within the confines of your org. Now, if you want to install an app in your org, it's pretty straightforward. We saw this OAuth usage page earlier. You've got a big install button there on the right. You're going to be prompted to confirm. That's all normal. And once you do, there's a page that shows all your installed connected apps. Now, if you dig into this, this is where you're going to see your options for permissions and policies. There's definitely quite a list, but there's a few we want to call out that are security related. One of the most important ones is permitted users. So this is where you as an admin choose whether users can opt in to use the app on their own, or if only users that you have approved are allowed to use the app. So if you choose the admin approved users options, once you save, you'll see a space where you can specify which profiles and which permission sets are associated with this app, and those are the users that will be allowed to use them. The second security option we want to call out here is IP relaxation. So as admins, you're probably familiar with the idea that you can enforce IP restrictions when users log into your org. So if they're not coming from an IP that you have approved, either on the org level or the user profile level, you can block access to your org. Now, those are two places where you can control it. There's a third option here for your connected app. You can choose to enforce those restrictions all the way. You can choose to relax them all the way. There's some options in between given different scenarios. There's great documentation and the help docs. I just want to call out here that this is an option for you to customize how it's being used. Next up, we have refresh token policy. So that sounds a little scary, but refresh tokens are basically a way for apps to renew their access to your org. Similar to how when you log into an app and the app creates you a session that keeps track of you, and when you log out, that session is terminated. There's a similar concept for connected apps. And so your options here are, if you want your app to be connected indefinitely to your org, you can choose that option. If you want it to be a one-time thing, you can do that too. If you want to specify the duration of the access based on a number of calendar days or the amount of activity that you're seeing, that's also an option. And finally, the fourth option that we want to discuss here is high assurance session required. So that's under session policies here. If you choose to enable that, what's going to happen is users will be asked to authenticate using two factors. So normally, a user is authenticated using a username and password. Two-factor authentication adds an extra layer of security to that. And so in addition to the password, the user will need something like an app on their phone that they physically have that generates a time-based token to really ensure that you are who you say you are. The flip side of installing an app is uninstalling an app. So we did talk about installing, but sometimes when people jump straight to the page, they get confused about what uninstallation means. Now, this does not remove or block the app from your org. You're actually uninstalling the policies that we set up in the installation stage. So if you choose to uninstall an app, what you're actually doing is you're weakening your security posture because you're reverting it back to the state that it used to be, where users can just opt in on their own without any of the additional security measures that you put in place. Because of that, what we suggest is that you only uninstall if this app is no longer in existence. Say the original developer deletes it, then you can uninstall it. But up until that point, you do want to keep what policies you have in place for as long as possible. If you do want to block a connected app, you're not going to do that with the uninstall button. You're going to do it with the block button. This is pretty straightforward. You click block. Anyone that was using it can't use it anymore. Anyone that wanted to use it can't use it until you unblock. That one's an easy one. And finally, that brings us to our last option. So when we talked about installing and blocking, those are reactive measures that you as an admin can take. Now, what that means for you is that you need to keep tabs on that usage page. And as apps come up, you can choose what you want to do about them. So you are experiencing a little bit of extra overhead. Now, if you want to take a really strong position and you want to block all apps unless you said they were OK, connected apps whitelisting / API client whitelisting is a feature that you should look into. Now, this is very powerful. It's very strong. So in the same sense, it can be quite restrictive. So this is something that you'll need to contact Salesforce to get enabled. Once you do turn it on, the only things that will be allowed to integrate with your org are whitelisted connected apps. If you had an API client that was integrated in a different way, that's going to be blocked. If you had a connected app installed in your org but not whitelisted, that's going to be blocked. So we've got some pre-enablement steps that you can walk through to make sure that you don't inadvertently block your end users from their day-to-day. You can work with your Salesforce rep to walk through those. But this is a great feature that is something you set in place now and stays as your org grows and matures, and is a great way to lock down your security posture. One thing we do want to call out is that because this feature is quite restrictive, we do have a user permission that if you make a mistake and you need to open that access back up, that you can use in the case of an emergency. And that is called the Use Any API Client User Permission. We do not recommend this as a building block in your solution. This is an emergency case only, because what it does is it grants a lot of access to your org, maybe even more than you originally intended. So for example, if you give a user this permission, they would be allowed to use a connected app even if they weren't authorized to use it. So you really want to be careful with how you use this. So we've talked today about what a connected app is. We've walked through an example. We've talked about why you as an admin would care about connected apps being used in your org. We covered how to understand the details around the usage in your org and what your options are for managing your connected apps. Again, I know that was a lot to cover in a short amount of time. These slides and the audio recording will be posted online. If you want to learn more on your own, we've got some great Trailhead modules. You can walk through these step by step. There's a lot of detail in them. I know it takes a while to kind of digest this information and really understand what's going on. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about OAuth or org security fundamentals, we have a talk here at 1:15. My coworker in the back there is going to give it about org security fundamentals. If you missed the OAuth talk, that was actually yesterday, keep an eye out for the recording, because that was a breakout session. So you'll be able to access that later. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and attention. That was a quick rundown of connected apps for admins. If you have any questions, I'll be here next to the booth after. We've also got a Ask a Security Expert booth upstairs. If you go to the second floor around the corner, we've got a bunch of engineers there that can answer your questions around security, admin stuff in general. You can ask questions to your heart's content. So thank you very much for coming to TDX.